T.J. Hooker returns next week at this time. Now a special presentation.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
I was excited to get the opportunity to work on Captain America for the regular series, particularly because after a long period of trying these other looks for the character, they were finally returning him to his classic appearance, and I had let it be known that I wanted to work on classic looks of characters as much as possible. And luckily, he's one of those characters you can never completely escape his original design. And it just would happen to be that Ta-Nehisi Coates would be writing this new series, which makes it even more of something to be a spotlight put on it. And he can bring a lot of topicality and a lot of introspection of what Captain America's symbol can mean today and what it's challenged by in terms of the times we live in. And it's a perfect way to be involved with the project because I've always felt that Captain America's got a great history of being a character relevant to what was going on in our world, what was going on in American society. He's never been just this flag-waving character of, you know, like, hey, whatever America does, just go along with it because, hey, we're all about America. In a way, he was a character of contradictions. He's draped in the flag, but he's always sort of running head up against these compromises for American ideals and what we should be keeping at our heart.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. You see my blanket in the background there? I was taking a nap on the couch before we got started. I'll admit it, Tim. John Suntress here. Happy to welcome not only the writer of Alan Scott, The Green Lantern, but also one of the co-writer and I guess, of Masters of the Universe Revolution.
Yeah, writer and somehow consulting producer this season as well. So, yes.
All right, excellent, Tim. I knew there had to be another credit beyond writer.
There's actually one more credit, too, and we'll talk about that later.
All right, but Tim Sheridan joins us. It's great to see you, man.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, are you kidding? Seriously, man, you're killing it. Let's start with He-Man, because I would imagine there's going to be questions. Got it dropped just last week. And I told you, I only watched the first 2 episodes so far. Listen, Tim, first of all, during the classic run, I was too old for He-Man. I was trying to date girls at that point. I always said Transformers, Thundercats, He-Man. I respect them all, but I was a little too old. But I certainly, again, I respect them all. And a lot of my good friends that are younger, that was their jam, and that's awesome. And I watched the first season, and I'm a knucklehead. Really, I couldn't name beyond Tila and He-Man and Prince Adam. That's where my ending of names goes.
Skeletor, Skeletor.
Of course, Skeletor. Shame on me. Of course, you're right. Of course, I do.
The great Mark Hamill on our show.
But yes, and he's killing it, and everybody's killing it. Susan Eisenberg, Enchantress once again.
The Sorceress, yes.
Or say there you go. Once again, wrong.
Narration in the opening of episode.
Yes.
Set up
she's my friend, and right away I'm like, that's Susan. That's fantastic. Yeah. I'm so happy that she opens the show.
One of a kind. I'm not only just personally, I'm crazy about her, but her work is unreal. I mean, it's unfortunate sort of where the Sorceress character is now in the plot of this show, because it means that we, I think, have a little less opportunity to although it's a world of magic and fantasy, so we still find ways to bring Susan in because you just can't do it without her. It's not a party.
No, that's great. And is it? And I always get her name wrong. Melissa Benoist.
Melissa Benoist
Benoist. Okay.
It's her debut as Tila.
Right, because it was Sarah Michelle Gellar in the first series. Right?
Sarah Michelle Gellar in the first season, but we weren't able to schedule her in for the second season. So the beauty of it is that Melissa, as many of your listeners know, is married to Chris Wood, who plays He-Man on our show. And so it sort of points you in the direction of where we're going in terms of these characters and
Sure.
that relationship. We get a lot of extra sort of oomph from the performances, from the fact that these two know each other very, very well.
No, that's great, and I love the idea that Susan is Tila's mentor and everything. So you got Wonder Woman mentoring Supergirl, which is in our cartoon comic book brains or our live action comic book brains.
Well, remember too, I mean, this is a show, the showrunner is Kevin Smith. And so there is a lot of love and a lot of comic book stuff that you see sort of infused into this show. Mark Hamill in there as Skeletor, Susan Eisenberg as the Sorceress. We had Kevin Conroy in the first show in Revelation. I know the incredible late great Kevin Conroy was our merman, and I'm missing a million more, but there's a lot of that. But also, I don't know if you've only done 2 episodes, but
right.
This season, Revolution is very much a Star Trek cast, John. Which I
didn't realize that's where you were going. That's great to hear. So listen, everybody. If you've watched all 5, go ahead. I'm gonna watch all 5 eventually. It's okay to spoil for me. Don't worry about it. But because Tamer Odar says,
yes,
we have to discuss Tim voicing Kim Mira this season. He knows Tim went to theater school. Would love to know if you've have acting experience, how your voicing debut came out. Were you fully game or were you hesitant?
So this is the 3rd credit I was referencing. Thank you, Tamar, for the question. I did get to do a little cameo in this season as King Miro, the grandfather of He-Man, in a flashback. And it's just the thrill of a lifetime. Yes, I did go to theater school, but I never really figured out. I was a successless actor for a short time, John, and I never could quite figure out how to make it in that part of the business. Happily, my writing career was a thing that happened. But yes, I think it's very much in the tradition of Masters of the Universe to have a producer voice characters in the show. A lot of people know that in the old classic cartoon that Filmation made, Lou Scheimer was well known for voicing a lot of characters. So you see, I'm in there. Also, our incredible executive producer for Netflix, whose dream it was to make this series, is Ted Biaselli, who voices Gwildor in this show, which spoiler, you're going to get that in the next episode.
Okay. But that's amazing. Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, well, Gwildor was a live action movie that was played by Billy Barty. And
I had heard that there was a nod to the movie in this season.
Well, I like to think of myself as a competent cameo voice actor. Teddy Biaselli is actually a trained professional voice artist who also just happened to have a career as a creative executive that really took him far at Netflix. And every now and then he gets to exercise the pipes, as it were.
Flex the muscle, absolutely, man.
And he does a fantastic sort of tribute to Billy Barty as.
Oh, that's great! That's outstanding.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Finish.
I was just going to say I don't want to talk about my cameo as Miro without mentioning my scene partner, the woman who plays my wife, Queen Amelia. It's her first time ever the character appearing in animation, and she's voiced by Harley Quinn Smith. Who is
Kev's daughter, sure.
And speaking of, the name like Harley Quinn, where it's a very comic book sort of show, but she's absolutely fantastic.
That's great.
She had all the heavy lifting. We have one scene together. She had all the heavy lifting. She did it so perfectly that it made me look like I actually knew what I was doing. So I was very pleased. It runs in the family clearly with her. So
that's excellent. Fred Van Lente, the wonderful Marvel and Image writer and Dark Horse and other things. His wife Crystal is a great off-Broadway playwright.
Oh wow!
And, a couple of years ago, one of her plays was in Chicago, and it called for a DJ to be off stage and coming through the radio and stuff. And she's like, "Would you be the DJ?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, again, Chicago radio, 30 years plus, I was a theater kid in high school and stuff. And I mean, I certainly always appreciated doing plays and things in high school. So I'm like, hell yeah, that would be amazing. So no, I could appreciate that feeling. Tamer says that Gates McFadden is He-Man's mom. So I've already, shame on me not recognizing Gates' voice.
Did you recognize Gates McFadden as Queen Marlena, He-Man's mom? Did you also recognize the voice of Granomir, the dragon, in episode 2?
No, tell me.
John, you're going to kick yourself.
Is it Michael Dorn?
It's John Delancey.
Oh, that's great. Good for him.
To himself. Yes. It is. And how can I even go on without mentioning the incredible William Shatner?
I did hear Shatner. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I mean, he is a force, that guy. And,
he can't miss that voice.
A man you'd never expect was in his 90s. He is just as sharp and as great as ever. Like, he hasn't missed a step, that guy. He's good. He's really good.
I don't know what kind of A-list lamb, whatever cells he's having injected in his ass to keep himself young. But that it's frightening. Hey, listen, I love Captain Kirk. Listen, and I know he's I hope he was easy to work with. I'm sure, given Kevin's love of Shatner, that it probably was an easy day. Were you there that day that some of these people were doing this stuff?
Yeah, I was. So the way we do it, a lot of us are. We're usually over Zoom. Since
I was going to ask, go on, Tim. Yeah.
A lot of times we're remote, but we're all in a big Zoom chat together, and the voice director Colette Sunderman is there. Kevin is there, and both of them are sort of giving direction and keeping everything moving. And every so often, a little sort of fun miracle happens. And this is an exclusive. So this is something that I'm going to tell you that we were recording the great Lena Headey as Evelyn for episode 2, where she has a lot of dialogue with Granomir, the dragon, eventually voiced by John Delancey. Well, while we were in the record, Colette, the voice director, asked if I would like to read in Granomir's lines with Lena and do the scene with her. And of course they cut me out and put John in later, but I got to act during the record with the incredible Lena Headey, and it was just remarkable. Like just an incredible gift of a moment that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. The minute that I heard that we had secured Lena to play Evelyn in season 1, I was writing a big Evelyn centered part in the first episode I wrote. I went right back to my computer and started rewriting all the dialogue for her, because I just know that I know her work and I know what she can do. And I gave her a lot more stuff to chew up, and really just made it real Shakespearean. And she just nails every line. She's so good. So anyway, what a gift and what a fun thing it was to get to work with her like that.
Okay, so you guys are now. Were you doing the voice stuff? Was COVID still a factor?
Yeah. So on Revelation, it was. We were recording during lockdown.
And forgive me, but like you guys did you guys split? Like were all these episodes put together at once and you guys split the seasons? Is that what you did?
Yeah, it was all written and conceived and produced at the same time, as if they were all going to drop at once, all 10 episodes of the first season of Revelation. And the way the production pipeline, the way things happen. And I think my understanding is because there was some stuff with COVID that, got in the way and slowed down some things, they ended up cutting the first 5 episodes and the second 5 episodes into 2 parts and dropped them, at different times. And unfortunately, I mean, it's actually unfortunate, because it was actually, I think we all agree, and a lot of people from the show have talked about this, that it was probably to the show's to the story's detriment. You really wanted to watch that whole thing through, all 10 episodes. If you haven't watched Revelation, it's still there on Netflix. Watch those episodes, watch all 10. And the beauty of Revolution, the sequel, the season 2, that just dropped on Thursday, is that it's only 5 episodes. And so you can watch the whole thing like a 2.5-hour movie and just get the whole story. And so there's no chance of it getting split up or anything like that.
Understood. So. And also, again, doing it Zoom. So
yeah,
you're not, the dialogue isn't, the dialogue is overlapped in post. And really, you know, I mean, so acting via Zoom, because I know sometimes, and it may even happen during this conversation, sometimes there's like a 1.5-second delay when people speak. So was it literally like, okay, do your line? They're kind of like, you know, if somebody wants to change something, Kevin or the director will intervene and say, yeah, do it again, do it differently or whatever. Is there kind of a delay between actors giving their lines?
No, I got to tell you, John, it's a great question. This is outside my area of expertise, but I will say I sat in on a lot of those records that were over Zoom, and I never noticed any sort of delay of any kind, which tells me that the technology, that whatever technology they're using is excellent.
Okay.
And of course, they can always just take it again if they find that there's a blip. The recording engineers are absolute geniuses. They hear everything. And so there's you know, it's I don't think it slowed anybody down. But you know, there were a lot of folks came in and recorded in the studio. Like I recorded the King Miro lines in the actual voice studio. Now, Kevin was over Zoom and Colette was over Zoom, and the producers were all dialed in over Zoom. It was just me and a recording engineer in the other side of the booth. And that's how I think we did Bill Shatner as well. Bill came in. I think the only person who was there in person, Teddy Biaselli was there when Bill was there, the Netflix executive producer.
Right.
But otherwise, we were all over Zoom, and Kevin was I think Kevin was directing him over Zoom. I think. But it's hard because I'm over Zoom, so I assume everybody else is remote as well.
You know, I'm kind of really, because I don't have this decade's love of Masters, and I do love people like yourself that are longtime fans. The Seeley brothers, Tim and Steve, who did that wonderful coffee table book of a lot of great Masters of the Universe art over the years for Dynamite. It's one of my favorite coffee table books, even though I'm not a big fan. But what I am a big fan of is things like Heavy Metal. And this is like right on the edge without being R-rated. But as far as the action, and I think the ideas that you guys brought, I'm a knucklehead when it comes to the mythos, and taking nothing away from Lou Scheimer and company. I got to, and I might have mentioned this the first time we talked to him. I got to see, I think, Lou Scheimer's last San Diego. That Andy Mangold's book had come out about the history of Filmation, and poor Lou. I mean, God bless him, a great guy, but he even admitted that Alzheimer's was starting to take over, and he's like, I'm not going to remember everything, but I'll do. You know, sat right next to Andy on the panel. And also Sid, oh God, I can't think of his name. The great evil character actor, and I'm kind of counting on the chat to know who I'm talking about.
Go to the chat.
But
I think I was there for that.
Okay. Oh, and
San Diego. I think I was there for that.
And I want to say Michael Gray was there too. Billy Batson from Shazam.
Oh,
and they were doing autographs, and they had this fantastic like widescreen strip of all the film, like the best Filmation characters. And Lou and Michael would sign it for you and stuff, and Andy signed it too. But yeah, I mean, so I'm a massive fan, but I really like a lot of, if they were original ideas and incorporating the movie, I think that's great. And truly it's fun. I mean, cause I'm I'm falling a little out of love with Tolkien-esque fantasy. And Game of Thrones kind of fantasy, and I'm just kind of, I don't know, all right, whatever. But I do appreciate the combinations that the original idea had of science fiction and fantasy.
And that's what the I mean, what a segue, John. Like that, that is at the core of what Revolution, the new season, is about. It is about that mix of magic and science, magic and technology.
Yep.
You know, and where do they work together and where do they work against each other? You know, that is at the core of the story this season. And that's the thing that I think Motu does that is a little bit unique. We don't see it a lot. You know, it's not pure science fiction and it's not pure fantasy. It's a dose of both in a very clever way. And it always was. It's not something we did. It's something that was always part of the brand. And
Don Glut,
you know,
right? Don Glut, wasn't he the guy? Don Glut, the animator that.
Oh,
Luke?
Yeah. See, that would be news to me. We'll have to go to that.
Right.
But do you mean in terms of filmation?
Yeah, I think he might have been the original toy guy. That this is what we got. We haven't named anything. Can you help us out with concepts and stuff?
They came up with like a barbarian line. It was kind of Conan-ish, and they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And I don't know at what point. There's a great book about this that I keep meaning to read. And it's what's the title of that book? Anyway, chat. About the origins of He-Man, and
sure.
And I think that somehow, I don't know how, but somehow they stumbled into combining these ideas, and those early mini comics that came with the action figures.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
They started telling the story. You know who worked on those was Bruce Timm. You see his name all over those early Masters of the Universe comics. So many great writers worked on the Filmation series. Our show is supposed to be kind of a continuation of the whole era, the whole thing, not just cartoons, but also the toys and the stories and the comics and everything that was told. It's hard to sort of marry all the different canons together, but you know, we do our best to not negate too much and try to celebrate it and then add a little bit more to it. It certainly is a slightly more grown-up version of Masters of the Universe because we all grew up, and you know, it's kind of the way we like to look at it is this show plays the way that it played, the way the old toys and the way you used to play with the toys, like with the weight of the stories that you would tell when you played with the toys.
Sure.
The weight of the story that we're telling. And I think we also watched the show like that too back then. We watched the movie like that. In our memory, those things are very grown up. And, you know, when you go back and look at them now, they don't necessarily hold up, but you can capture the feeling that you felt when you originally experienced it. That's something one of my great mentors, Jim Krieg, taught me very early on. He said, that's what we do. We try to capture the feeling that you felt when you first experienced, you know, these properties and these brands and these characters, and that's the win.
I want to remind the people watching live some of your other credits that, by all means, we can absolutely get into.
Let's talk more about me and my credit.
Well, yeah, you're the guest, Tim. But you know, I mean, it's true. Transformers War for Cybertron, that trilogy. Dragon Age Absolution, those are recent ones. You did both parts of Long Halloween. You did you did the Showcase Losers, Man of Tomorrow, the Reign of the Supermen, didn't you?
I did Reign of the Supermen with Jim Krieg and Alan Burnett, James Tucker. What a great experience that was. That was the first DC thing I got to adapt. Before that, I'd worked on a series called Justice League Action that a lot of people didn't get to see. People who saw it, like you, John, love that show. I think rightfully so. It's a good show.
I'm sure we talked about it last time, Tim. Yeah. It truly, what I love about that show, because it was every episode was technically only 15 minutes long.
Yeah, they were like 11. They were 11 minutes an episode.
That's what I was, man, you guys would do 11 minutes of story. Yeah. And it was like so like packed of story. And it's like, there's no way in hell they're going to be able to tell a decent Justice League story in 11 minutes. Like, watch us.
A Justice League Unlimited sized cast. Like it was everybody you could imagine was making an appearance in that show.
Space Cabbie. I mean, beyond the superheroes.
Voiced by Patton Oswalt. I just did a signing with Patton, a couple of them just recently. He was promoting Minor Threats.
Oh, that's great. There you go.
He was space. That's where I met him, was when he voiced Space Cabbie, and he's so great. That whole cast is unreal. We had Conroy and Hamill as our Batman and Joker in that show. You know, it's a good show.
Is it streaming on, and forgive me, because really, Max, what are you doing? As always,
let's find, where is it streaming now? Is it streaming right
I
now?
have a bad feeling it probably isn't, because I don't think
it was on Hulu, and I think it was on Netflix, but I don't think it's there anymore. It's somewhere else, maybe. Let's hope. And if it's not, it will be soon. And I hope everyone gets a chance to check it out. It's a funny show because it appeals to young kids and adult fans.
Yes.
And if there's no difference in the way you're laughing at the same jokes, you're getting all the same jokes, and it's Prime Video, says Tamar.
Tamar says Prime Video. That's great to hear, man. We all have that.
Please check it out. It's a good show. So that's where I started. Then I got to I wrote some Scooby-Doo movies too, which was fun.
Yes, you did.
Scooby-Doo. And then I got to do Reign of the Supermen, which was the first. Those were the first Superman comics I ever bought as a kid. And I wasn't
great, man.
Teenager, but I just wasn't. Superman wasn't my guy. It was Batman. And but that's what it wasn't even Death of Superman, John. Like that was so promoted. But I didn't even pick that up. I picked up Reign because I was like, I don't know who these guys are, but I want to know who's the real Superman.
Well, that was the mystery. Absolutely, man. These 4 guys showing up. I know it's one of my favorite stories. I was just speaking to Dan Jurgens a couple weeks ago, not about that, about the new thing he's got coming up in March, that 1939 Batman story that he and Mike Perkins are doing. But it's a good time for you, man. And we'll get to GL, I promise everybody, because I saw very, very early on Chad saying that he's loving Alan Scott. And me too, man. Absolutely. Let's see here. Casey says he forgot about the He-Man mini comics. Absolutely. And then we did cover this, but I want Justin to affirm for Justin that was it a 5-episode complete season, or is there a part 2 coming later this year?
5 and out. You got the whole story for Revolution, and hopefully, in our wildest dreams, enough people watch the show. Not only watch it, but watch it soon, John. Please watch the rest of the episodes.
Yes, sir. I will.
And if you like what you see, and I cannot stress this enough, people like to think that their vote doesn't matter. Unfortunately, it matters. If you like it, click the double thumbs up button on Netflix to tell them that you loved it. And if you do that, and if enough people do that, then we get an opportunity perhaps to make more. And
that'd be great.
I don't think viewers realize the power they have. We're sort of discouraged. We all think, one vote doesn't matter. And, we look at elections and we think, how did I make a difference? Let me tell you, you can make a difference when you click those double thumbs up on Netflix. If you liked it, I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you do. And even if you didn't love all of it, but you still want more, click the double thumbs up anyway, because that's
fair. Well, and I wonder, Tim, and I wanted to get to this because there was a lot of pushback in season 1 from fans. And I understand, whatever. There's the show you expect and the show you're given. And sometimes the show in your mind is different from what you get on screen. Listen, I say that as someone that, shakes my fist at new Star Trek for the last 6 years. I won't deny that for most of it. There's a couple things I like, and it's gotten better. Absolutely. But regardless, for this second season, was there any thought of, all right, well, is there a way that we could write this to bring back anybody that was disappointed in season 1?
I got to tell you, I was there, and those were not the marching orders, and that wasn't what we were thinking. I think. And you see, as you're referencing, markedly, there is a difference in the reaction to Revolution than we saw to Revelation. Some of the reaction for Revelation was from people who aren't really fans, but wanted to make a lot of noise. They had a political or whatever. There was some of that. But there were also legitimate longtime fans of the franchise who were looking for one thing and they felt they got another thing. And at least in the first 5 episodes, the second 5 episodes is kind of a little bit more of a traditional.
I'm with you. No, I agree.
But I think what you have to remember is that what we were trying to do was take 40 years of disparate versions of the canon and try to come up with a thing that felt like a natural extension of it. And I think what Kevin's original title for the show was Masters of the Universe, End of the Universe. And the reason for that was because he felt, and I think he was right, because I think unfortunately we had to go through it with Revelation to get Revolution. But it was about deconstructing the whole thing and reminding us why He-Man is so important and why Skeletor is so bad and why He-Man's friends are so important to him and to the universe. We needed to go through the deconstruction and then rebuilding of that in order to have Revolution. That's really what that's what Revolution revolves around now, is that the dynamic of all of those relationships that we were able to sort of earn back, I think, in the first season. I think a lot of longtime fans would be like, well, you don't have to earn anything back from me because I already felt that these were the relationships. And I know that, yes, that there's a lot of people who feel that way. But there were a lot of casual fans too, and a lot of new fans who came in, and we needed, I think, I think we needed to start the way we did, and it was always going to be shaky ground, and we knew that from the beginning. What we weren't expecting, I think, were the trolls who didn't really care about it, who wanted to make noise about it, clickbait stuff and everything. That was the stuff that took, I think, everybody by surprise, and it got conflated with the legitimate criticisms of the real fans, and unfortunately, like those things were very different. They had different intentions behind them. The good news is you're not seeing a lot of that stuff for Revolution, and the stuff you do see that's kind of like, naysayers are people who just didn't get over the Revelation thing and want those clicks again. And I think you're seeing a real genuine reaction from fans, a real positive reaction, and that warms everybody's heart. I've been texting with Kevin Smith since the debut, all through the weekend, and he sees the difference. He sees the difference in the reaction, and I think he's happy that all this work that he's put in is getting a happy reaction now. Because let me tell you, John, and your listeners, it's not just because the guy's my boss. I really legitimately cannot tell if you guys ever have an opportunity to work with Kevin Smith in your life. My God, take it, because I have never met someone who is as devoted, who is as generous, who is as smart. He is so fast. I can't believe how fast he can write something that is runs circles around something that I write over 2 weeks. He can do it in a day. He also, this is the thing that I've never told it. I don't think I've ever said this. I walked in, we were working on breaking the story for Revolution. I went into his office. It was just me and him, and I brought a big whiteboard with me with markers, because when we did season 1, we didn't have any whiteboards, and all the writers were like, we don't know what to do, because we're all used to working
sure,
right over here, you can't see it, but we're just so accustomed to that. And so I brought it in, and he laughed at me, and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I need this, I have to work with this. And the reason why he doesn't work with it is because he remembers everything. It's a steel trap. Every note, every idea that comes up, everything makes its way into the script. And I look at it, I'm like, I don't understand. You didn't even write that down. I forgot that we talked about that thing. And it's there, and it's even better than you expected it to be. Nobody works harder than that guy, and nobody, I think, produces a better result as fast as that guy can. I'm impressed with him every time I work with him.
Well, and again, everybody has to remember, listen, the guy is one of us, to quote, freaks. But it's true. I mean, my God, that's not only the stuff that he's made, but the stuff that were treatments that didn't get made and then made into Dynamite Comics. The guy had ideas for $6 Million Man that were really good. He had ideas for Green Hornet that were really good. And don't judge it by the Seth Rogen movie. That's not what I'm talking about. But no, that's the thing, man. So I had no doubt that there's a genuine love for the IPs that he does get to work on. And I mean, I
But
love
he
his
was like
Batman
you.
story.
He was like you. He was a little bit older than He-Man when it was on TV.
Yeah,
So
and I don't want to betray his age. I'm 59. I always thought he's either my age or slightly younger.
he's a little younger, but
But close enough. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was just outside the range where he wasn't watching it every afternoon necessarily. But he did, I think, pick it up. It was sort of a thing that he picked up and watched. I think he's talked about this, but originally, like, he wasn't like the rest of us who were watching it. I did. By the way, I did not have any of the toys when I was a kid.
Okay.
Which is a travesty, but I was a Transformers and G.I. kid. And we were poor, and like I can't believe I even got what I got.
Sure.
So one more brand on there, my parents, it would have broke them, I think, if I like insisted on He-Man. But I did watch the show. I watched She-Ra and He-Man. But
Sure.
yeah, but he's a guy who just knows his way around this type of stuff. Even if he had never seen He-Man before in his life, and then only came to it on our show and had gotten the crash course and fallen in love with it before we started, you'd still get the full 150% Kevin Smith that you get. By the way, Kevin is just one of the towers of magic in the room of producers. Teddy Biaselli from Netflix, another executive producer who's a lifelong fan of Masters of the Universe, and just this was his dream project, and he has brought everything to this. And he's done some of your favorite shows on Netflix. He's been behind the as a creative executive on some of the biggest shows out there. But you don't see his name a lot. You wouldn't know that he's the guy that did, Umbrella Academy and Lost in Space, and he's doing the upcoming live action Avatar series and Dark Crystal, and just tons of amazing stuff. And then Rob David, who is a brilliant writer and producer who you may recognize his name from the Masters of the Universe DC comics like Eternity War. He came, he comes from the world of Mattel Television, but he came up as a writer and as a creative, and he's, those three guys together are the brain trust of Revelation and Revolution. And I am happy when I get to work for them and with them. I think it got announced a 2 weeks ago that I am scripting from a story by Rob David, Teddy Biaselli, and myself, the Masters of the Universe Revolution prequel comic book for Dark Horse that's going to be beginning May 15th. So
congratulations. That's great.
Yeah. I'm following up because I did the same thing with Kevin and Rob for Revelation. There's a prequel comic book, 4 issues that we did for that. And then, so this will be the Revolution one. It's a great story about the history of Hordak and Skeletor, the complicated, complex web that is woven between them, and why things end up where they do in the series. So I hope people check that out. Pre-order, please.
That's great. Wonderful news.
Speaking of Tim Seeley, by the way, Tim Seeley did who's a brilliant writer of Masters of the Universe comics and a terrific artist, because he drew a variant cover for issue 4 for our Revolution prequel comic that will be out this year. And I was very happy. It's the closest Tim and I have gotten to a collaboration. And he's not off the hook yet, though. We still are in, we have to actually write something together. But
yeah, man.
We'll convince him to draw it. We'll see. But
that sounds great. No, as I said, I mean, really, it's Tim and his brother Steve that are my local Masters of the Universe people that just adore it. And it really, I'm always like, all right, tell me more. Why did you guys like it? Whatever. And obviously age had something to do with it. But again, I get it. And I love that, how much they love it. So that does surprise me. And I was going to ask if you've had the opportunity to work with Tim. So I'm glad that at least he's doing the cover.
Mostly I run into him at cons and stuff. And he is such a bundle of happiness and joy and love. And I'm crazy about him. And what I really love about him is the number of people that confuse me with him because of Tim S.
Sure.
And oh, I love your Masters of the Universe comics, Forge of Destiny, and and I'm
Well,
like,
exactly, and he's done his share of Masters of the Universe comics
I
too.
will
Yeah.
happily take a bow and call myself Tim Seeley because he's beloved by Motu fans.
Dr. Galakowitz? Yes, I am, if you remember that commercial. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. Great comments here coming up, and I want to Peter Beiser says, I wish we got to see Kevin's version of Fletch. Yes, he wanted to do it with Jason Lee, not to be. And then Justin says, Sarah Michelle Gellar did great as Tila, but I got to say I loved Melissa Benoist. She and Chris Wood killed it. Definitely their real relationship bled into their voices in Revolution. Yeah. So that's cool.
Kevin officiated their wedding.
I did know he's a real minister. I do know that. So that doesn't. Yeah. Did he wear Jedi robes when he did it? That's the question.
I don't know. No, I don't think so.
All right, fair enough.
Maybe later that night. Who knows?
Casey says, my parents refused to buy She-Ra toys for me because those are dolls. So, yeah, whatever. That's hilarious. I was literally just watching Best in Show. And there's that great scene where Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara and, oh, God, I can't think of his name. Another great comic. But they're all having dinner and stuff. And there's a little boy there, and he's playing with his action figure. And it's like, don't call it a doll. That's an action figure. So, yeah. No, that's true.
I was that kid who was terrified to say that I wanted She-Ra figures when I was a kid. But I didn't quite know that I was gay at that point. But I think that maybe something inside of me was like, oh, don't tell them you want She-Ra dolls.
I understand, man. No, absolutely.
I still every episode of the show.
Come on, absolutely. I've never. I know that it was on Netflix, and it may still be there. But I know there was that She-Ra He-Man Christmas special too.
Oh yeah, there's the Christmas special. We just watched it again for Christmas. Teddy, I went over to Teddy's house and we watched that.
That's great, man.
Along with the Smurfs Christmas special, which we put on as
lovely, fantastic. That's great.
I think maybe we put on both actually. The Smurfs.
No, and again, it's the Christmas specials of your youth because for me, it's always Charlie Brown Christmas. I always point out that the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer debuted the day I was born. So I am as old as it's going to be 60, sadly, this Christmas.
And look how it's going strong,
Hey, man, that's a fun. Come on, Rankin and Best, all that Rankin and Best stuff. I remember when it was brand new. So yeah, Rudolph, I was a baby, but
I just found out last night, and I put it on because I didn't know this, that my husband had never seen The Secret of the Sword, which is the He-Man She-Ra movie that introduces She-Ra. And my jaw dropped when he said he hadn't seen it. I was like, I haven't shown this to you? And so we put it on last night.
That's awesome. Isn't it great when your partner is into the same nerdy shit? Because for a while, when I was writing boxing, I had one girlfriend that was a photographer, and she would come with me to fights, and she'd shoot the action shots, and it was fantastic. I wrote the articles, and she got the photos, and we'd be in Boxing Illustrated together. And I'm like, oh, isn't that cute? We're both in Boxing Illustrated.
I have to tell you, there is the biggest surprise of my life and career is that I have Brian in my life, and I don't think I would have a career as a writer if it wasn't for him. When we met, one of our first dates, I pitched him an idea that I had for a GoBots movie that I really thought would be great. And I had tried to pitch it to other people, other friends, and they all kind of laughed and, moved on quickly.
Yeah, isn't that cute? Yeah.
And he was enraptured.
That's fantastic.
when I was finished, he said, well, you have to make this. You have to do it. And you're going to do it. And I had never had anybody like that in my life, that close to me ever. And
that's felt great,
man. Somebody who believes in you and who's in your corner. And it changed everything for me. I think it changed my whole outlook. And he's a big lifelong Marvel Comics fan, which is amazing because I'm a lifelong DC Comics fan. And so we are a divided house in that regard. But there's enough overlap. We're not exclusive to those, but that's where our expertise is.
It's cracking me up ever since Mickey Mouse hit the public domain. These ridiculous speculative articles. Well, we're within 10 years for Batman and Superman. Could Marvel put them in comics, and they may not know. Do you know the whole thing about in Quasar, the former Marvel boy?
Yeah.
After in the early '90s, they introduced a character, and it was a blonde guy, and he had a tattered boots on, and
Yeah.
and it was his name, like he thought his name was Buried Alien, and
Yeah.
it was their inside joke that no, this was Barry Allen who died in Crisis, and he crossed universes, and for a while Barry Allen was in the Marvel universe, which killed me.
I didn't know about that until Jeremy Adams told me about it recently. We were just, we shoot the shit, pardon me, all the time, and
No, you can say that. That's it.
we talk on the phone like every day, and we have for years, and like as we're getting started writing for the day, and he was the one who told me about that. My jaw was on the floor. I was like, really? Barry Allen is a Marvel character. Who knew?
I think eventually they called him Slipstream, but yeah, it's fantastic. I love the idea of Barry Allen being in the Marvel universe. But it's like, but there's all these trademark versus what can be in the public domain. And I always point to Tarzan as the example, where it's like Dynamite can do a Tarzan comic. They can't call it a Tarzan comic as far as the title. They call it Lord of the Jungle because the name Tarzan is trademarked, and there's nothing you can do about that. So yeah, Batman could show up. I don't know what they'd call him. I don't know what DC has trademarked in terms of. I'm reasonably certain Man of Steel is trademarked. I'm reasonably certain Up and Away is trademarked.
But it's the same thing with Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse, the reason why Steamboat Willie is the only one that's available is because Disney aggressively has updated their trademarks constantly, and they've refreshed Mickey Mouse so many times that they are not the same necessarily in the eyes of the law, the same thing. The original version versus the later versions of Mickey Mouse.
You got it.
You'll see that they'll all eventually enter the public domain, but there will always be new versions of Mickey Mouse being trademarked all the time. So,
oh yeah, no, we'll be long in the dirt. Good Lord, and and me by a good 20 or so before you.
I'll be happy to be at that point. I don't want to see any more of this public domain stuff happening. I mean, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. As a writer, I find that interesting because
I love that things enter the public domain. I just don't love all of the speculation and the drama. And all of the stuff that's been going on with Mickey Mouse questions. I don't love the corporations that are coming in and like fighting to hold on to the copyright for longer than the law allows. Like all the drama. I know it sounds ridiculous for a gay man to say I'm over the drama, but I'm over the drama.
No, I understand. Because I know a lot of my writer friends, started writing Sherlock Holmes, writing Dracula, writing King Arthur, Robin Hood. So I understand. I mean, again,
what the Mad Cave is doing, right? They've got Flash Gordon that Jeremy Adams is doing. They've got, I think, are they the ones doing Dick Tracy?
Yeah, but that Dick Tracy is still copywritten.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought.
Oh God,
public domain.
Well, Bendis and Mike Oeming were going to do for the Tribune company that owned the comic strip rights to Dick Tracy around late 90s or very early 2000s, around the time that they were doing Powers. And, as we all know, Warren Beatty still has the film rights.
Right.
And even Warren, with whatever rights he owns, was able to stop the project from happening. And also Tribune wanted to do a live action Dick Tracy TV series, a police procedural, and Beatty stopped him from that as well. And that's, God, you probably know, a year or two ago, they had that bizarre where Warren Beatty interviewed Dick Tracy, little video that Turner Classic Movies made.
Yes.
Very strange. Very strange.
I promised that I would not talk about this, and I'm only going to mention it to say I'm not talking about it.
All right.
Because it ties so and I can't resist because it ties so perfectly to what we're talking about. But a lot of people know that there is a trademark, copyright, whatever it is, legal issue with She-Ra and He-Man, and that is why you haven't seen She-Ra on TV with He-Man before. But anyway, I'm not to comment on it, just to say that has always been the thing that fans of He-Man have always sort of been the bane of their existence, because fans see that all as one thing, and it is the story-wise in terms of the canon. It's all one thing. So we're all hopeful that all that stuff is going to get sorted out and sorted out soon.
I understand that for the longest time, Rom and the Space Knights had their legal issues for Marvel because Marvel did the original Rom thing, but Hasbro, I believe, still held the rights to Rom, so the Marvel could do a Space Knights comic, but without Rom, it's like, what are you talking about? So slightly similar.
Yeah.
I could see that. A few more comments from the chat. Let's see. Oh, Tamer first says, you know how to, is it Timur? Am I saying it wrong?
Tamar, I think is
Tamar. I apologize.
I've got it wrong every time I've talked to you, Tamar, but yes.
Now I kind of want to see Tim try his hand in the current Energon or Energon. I'm assuming Energon universe.
Yeah, Energon, which is
all right.
Stuff with Transformers and G.I. Joe. Again, John, showing your non-Transformers G.I. Joe side here, but yeah, that stuff is really, really cool. You got Daniel Warren Johnson doing the Transformers book, and you've got Josh Williamson and doing Duke and Cobra Commander, and
yes,
I think Larry Hama is going to be doing Joe again, and so it really amazing stuff happening over there. I love those books. And Tamar, I did not put Tamar up to this question, but and he probably doesn't even know, but yeah, that is absolutely where I would be there in a second. Oh, we got it right, Tamar. I would be there in a second to work on those. Especially, I've never gotten to work on G.I. Joe, which would be really amazing. I've been rewatching all Real American Hero lately. John, if you ever have a chance, pick it up. Take a look at A Real American Hero. It is that show. We were talking about how those shows don't always hold up. That show holds up. It's good. It's still a good watch. Check it out.
All right, man. We'll see. I mean, because again, so many of my friends, like you mentioned, Josh, working on the book, and I've always had respect and tremendous admiration for Larry Hama and what he did for the Joe universe.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody can take that away from him.
He nearly defined it. Yeah, I mean,
literally
cartoon, but he took it as nobody expected, and now we could never live without.
Oh, that's nice, Danny. He's late to the party. Looking forward to catching up on the replay of the podcast. Yeah, man, or rewind the video. Absolutely, man. But either way, as long as you're listening and watching, I thank you on that. Justin says, "Hey, Tim, DC comic wise, I think you should do Aquaman. I bet you could do a good 50-issue run at least. For Marvel, I'd like to see you do the same for Doctor Strange. Maybe you could even do Namor as well. Good suggestion."
Justin, I mean, I need new management. What do you do? What is your
That's awesome, man.
I'm actually very happy with my reps, so I don't want that if they're watching. I'm crazy.
Yeah, wait a minute. Hey! Peter says, enjoying Larry Hama still on G.I. Joe. 42 years, after he started Real American Hero. And I'm hoping to talk to him in the weeks ahead. Brian Volk Weiss, who created the toys that made us and the movies that made us. And I know he's got a new comic book deal with Oni. But, man, those documentaries about G.I. Joe. I also saw a different one that was produced about G.I. Joe that really goes back to my G.I. Joe, the 12-inch figure, the original design. I had G.I. Joes, absolutely. Kung Fu Grip.
Those were
the ones with beards? Come on, man. That was hilarious. And
they're great for their own thing, but they're so different than...
Oh, no, and I totally respect that. But, again, man, like, are you kidding me to have, like, a full scuba uniform for G.I. Joe that you could play with in the bathtub? Are you kidding me? My God, that was like a thrill.
Did you ever have Mattel's answer to G.I. Joe, Big Jim? Do you remember?
No, but I'm certainly aware of Big Jim because it would be on the back cover of pretty much every comic book I was reading when Big Jim came out. But where I was a massive fan of a Mattel product, Major Matt Mason, the astronaut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Boy, they were working on... Tom Hanks I think he had the rights and was working on a movie, but I don't know.
I know, and it breaks my heart because, man, that would make such a great, like... Yeah. He's too old now. He'd have to be somebody in command or whatever. But man, God bless my father. He bought me everything
years ago.
I mean, I had the buggy, the moon crawler, and the space station.
Oh,
I mean, again, it's so funny. What was I watching that made me rewatch on YouTube a bunch of Apollo documentaries. Oh, For All Mankind on Apple.
Oh, I love that show so much.
Oh my God. Oh, and then
the weirdest thing in the world, I got to do a panel at New York Comic Con, just me and Ron Moore talking about the business. Who's the
Wow.
You must know that he's an incredible writer who gave us not only Star Trek, but also Battlestar Galactica reboot and For All Mankind.
Everything.
And everything. And he's an incredible guy and such a talent. And I don't know what I was doing sitting next to him, but I was so happy. And at one point, Ashley, the moderator, said something, made reference to my adaptation of The Long Halloween, and Ron Moore lit up and he said,
"Oh, that's great.
The Long Halloween is my favorite comic book. Did you had something to do with that?" And I said, "Why, I certainly did." Afterwards, he was like, "Where can I watch it?" And I said, "It's on Max." And then I realized, by the way, it's not on Max anymore. They just took it off. But not realizing, John, that I had copies of the 4K in my backpack that I could have handed to
Tim,
right there. And I felt like a fool after that. How cool would that have been? Although it might have looked desperate. He's like, "Where do I find a copy?" "Why, right here, Ron Moore."
But you're at a con. He gets it.
Yeah,
I met him very briefly at San Diego. Didn't get the opportunity to book him, but he was very kind regardless. Same thing happened to me with Stephen Moffat regarding Doctor Who.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but what I love is I have a very good friend, my friend Susan, who lives in New York. She was really like, we worked together in the 90s in radio, and I'm like, "You got to see this. You got to see that." "Yeah, whatever." And then she married a nerd, Zach, and Zach has really gotten her into stuff, and they love Outland. And isn't it Outland? Yeah, Outland on Stars that Ron Moore does, the time travel romance show and everything. And she's like, "Do you know who Ron Moore is?" I'm like, "Yeah, I was trying to get you to watch Galactica 20 years ago when it was brand new, because this guy's such a genius writer."
20 years ago. I can't believe that. I used to go over to my friend Teddy Biaselli's house. Teddy was the Netflix executive on Masters of the Universe. We used to watch Battlestar Galactica when it would air every week. We would gather, a whole bunch of friends would all gather and watch it religiously. By the way, speaking of, I was talking about Big Jim. I went off on a Ron Moore tangent, but I was talking about Big Jim. Jeremy Adams and I, years ago, pitched Mattel on a Big Jim series.
Wow.
And we didn't get, we got in the door, but then nothing ever came of it after that. But that's the one time he and I went in and pitched a TV show together. After that, we pitched DC Comics on what eventually became Flashpoint Beyond together. But those are the only two times I think we've ever pitched together.
Another fantastic miniseries that you were involved in. And I was going to ask, all right, let's, because again, I don't want to keep you forever, Tim. You'll forgive me. But I love where the conversation has gone so far.
I'm here for you.
Well, you're a good man. Let's get into Alan Scott. And, now it drops tomorrow, issue 4?
Yeah. So tomorrow, January 30th, issue 4 of 6 is in stores. You can see it. Yeah. Behind me here too. But yes, that is,
there's a splash page of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to spoil. I mean, we do know. And as I was telling you before we went on the air, I'm like, "Oh, that's great. The Spectre is there." I'm like, I definitely got to talk to Tim again and talk about my love for the Spectre. And then at the end of the issue, it's like, next issue, the Red Lantern. And I'm like, "Well, all right, I'll wait 30 days for the Red Lantern. It's fine." And my God, I've had the pleasure of reading it already. It comes out tomorrow, everybody. But mentioning Flashpoint Beyond and your work with Jeff Johns on that, this is great. This really does flesh out a lot of the details, although I'm sure there's more, of the Red Lantern story that started in Jeff Johns' Justice Society of America current run. And it's, who's this Red Lantern? Well, he's from the 50s. And, Jeff, and I love that he's been doing this in a lot of his books. You'll get a who's who page, like classic DC, DC's version of Oh Hotmu. And, okay, there's a little bit more there. And obviously there's a big mystery of her daughter in Jeff's series. But I would imagine coordination between the two of you to tell Alan's side of the Red Lantern story.
So here's how it happened. I mean, if you read Flashpoint Beyond and you read New Golden Age #1, and if you're reading the New Golden Age titles, all of it grew out of some stuff that Jeff had wanted to sort of seed into Flashpoint Beyond. And at the time, we're writing this story, and Jeremy and I think we're writing this story that's just about Thomas Wayne coming to find a way to move beyond his grief. And meanwhile, and we're doing that. And Jeff is with us and doing that. And then pages here and there would come in from Jeff, and Jeremy and I would be like, what is this? What's this going to be? And this is the genius of Jeff Johns. He's working like 4 moves ahead, and he's planting seeds for stuff. And so that all ended up being part of the Flashpoint Beyond story. And then he had this idea to bring back some Golden Age characters and Golden Age titles. He called it the New Golden Age, and he pitched DC on it. And it kind of, was something they kind of talked around for a long time and didn't jump at. And then when they finally decided that they were going to do something, Jeff called me and he said, "Hey, so we have this opportunity. We're gonna start with a Wesley Dodds Sandman book, a Jay Garrick Flash, and Alan Scott Green Lantern." And he said, "I think you've got an Alan Scott story. I bet you've got a story that you can tell. And from your perspective, writing a story about a closeted gay hero in the 1940s, and what that entailed and what that means for him." And because that's what we know about Alan Scott now. That happened. We saw it in Earth 2, and then it came into main continuity a few years ago that Alan Scott came out of the closet. And nothing had really been done with the character. It was sort of like he made an appearance here or there in a couple of pages in other people's books, but the story hadn't been told. And he said, "What do you think?" And I was kind of a little bit terrified about it. And then I was like, "I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I have ideas, but I don't know." And then we started talking about the Red Lantern and this idea that there was a classic nemesis of Alan Scott, the Soviet answer, which I think we came up with on that call, the Soviet answer to the Green Lantern, the Red Lantern, powered by the Crimson Flame, as disconnected from the Red Lantern Corps that we know today as Alan Scott is disconnected from the Green Lantern Corps that we know today. Two sort of sides of a coin. And what would that look like, and what would that be, and what would the nature of their relationship be? And I don't think I'm spoiling anything at this point. I think everyone who's read issues 1, 2, and 3 knows, if you haven't read those issues, mute now. But the dynamic of their relationship, I said, Alan is known for being the guy that married 2 villains. He married Harlequin and Thorn, and that is sort of part of his legacy. And I said, I although it's tragic, it makes absolute sense for him to have had a romantic relationship with his arch nemesis, in the way that Batman and Catwoman, although I wouldn't say Catwoman's Batman's arch nemesis, but that idea of having a very complex relationship between protagonist and antagonist. And once we locked into that on that call, then the whole thing started exploding. And I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what we're going to do. And so I was very, very, very fortunate that Jeff believed in me and believed in the idea and the story and set it up for success the way he did. And then I just got to go and tell my story. And so far it's been incredible. I'm amazed at how well received it's been. The reviews have been kind of overwhelming, and people's reactions have been really great. I mean, obviously there are always going to be detractors out there who like Masters of the Universe, who have an agenda, and there are people who genuinely don't like things, sure, but I talk about the people who have an agenda, who are trying to
the trolls,
political thing, and the trolls, and that stuff gets really loud, and you can confuse that with the real fans and the real story. When you listen to when you tune those guys out and you listen to the real fans, the response has been beautiful and overwhelming. And I'm so happy, so proud of it. The team is incredible. Kian Tormey is doing the work of his life as
it's beautiful, beautiful art.
Yeah,
absolutely, man. Well, honestly, and I'll confess this, Tim, and I'm sure I said this to you before. And in fact, if people listened or watched my conversation with Steve Orlando last week, I always fess up that I never felt I was a troll, but I'm a longtime Alan Scott fan. Going back to when I first saw a reprint in I forget what 100-page spectacular, they reprinted the Dr. Fate and Hourman team up from Showcase in the mid '60s, and it's them fighting Solomon Grundy, and all of a sudden Alan Scott shows up at the end of the story, and it's Green Lantern, and it's like, it is? Who the hell is that? What's with this costume? What's with the cape? What's with the blonde hair? That's not Green Lantern. Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. Who is this guy? So immediately I was intrigued, and then
on his left hand.
Everything, man. And then, they reprinted in a big softcover edition, a bunch of Secret Origins, and they had the original Alan Scott story in there. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Big fan of the JSA for so many years. And I'll admit my initial response was, oh, you're turning him gay? What the hell? Well, it's James Robinson with Earth 2. And I'm like, I'm not against gay characters. But why? Literally, and again, I'm admitting this. It's like, well, why are you taking my favorite Green Lantern and making him gay? Where is this? He was, like you said, he was married to Harley Quinn, Harley Quinn. He was married to the Thorn. He has 2 kids, Jade and Obsidian. What's this gay stuff? I don't get it.
That to me, that's why it's so important. That's why, because Alan represents real people.
Yes.
These are our fathers and our uncles and our neighbors and our brothers, and they especially those who were around in the 40s who could not, for various reasons, be who they were openly and honestly, who lived their lives a certain way, and who come out of the closet late in life. And it happens. It's real, and it's worth telling their story.
I hate saying it because it sounds like so Karen of me. One of my best friends. But it's the truth. A good friend of mine in his 50s calls me up, and was married, has an adult daughter now, and he's like, I think I'm gay. And I'm like, are you happy? He's like, yeah, I think I am. Great,
and
do it.
And
what Jim did, what Jim, go ahead.
That's the reaction that Alan Scott deserves from you too.
Well, of course. And honestly, when James, for the 80th anniversary GL special, rewrote the origin and threw that in, and also having read Cavalier and Clay, the Michael Chabon novel, I'm like, just as you said, well, wait a minute. Now there's a reason, and forgive me because it's not necessary, but beyond the secret identity of Green Lantern and Alan Scott, this closeted man has to keep another identity secret. Now you've intrigued me, and truly, I think you've handled it so well for this knuckle-dragging Neanderthal you're talking to right now. But truly, it's like, okay, and all of a sudden, just like a stone hitting a pond in the ripples, it's like, well, what does that mean with his relationship with Jay? What does that mean with a lot of his JSA members? Who knew? Who didn't know? Mm-hmm. And that's why it was so exciting in issue 3 to see the Spectre show up. Doiby Dickles, for God's sake, the cab driver. All these people that we've known for years being part of Alan Scott's life. Now there's a different spin. And for a reader, you've intrigued me in what else don't I know about this man that I've been aware of literally for 50 years.
And I just thank you so much. And that's the place that I was hoping we would get to with readers who were skeptical about the change with Alan, about the revelation of his sexuality. It was not fair to readers to do that and then make you wait years for a story that would say, hey, and here's why why this is happening in his story. Here's what you have to what we have for you to take from this and to learn about your world. It was a little, I'm being critical, but I wasn't there. I think it was a little ham-fisted. And so I'm happy that we got to come in and sort of at least say, hey, here's a story that gives you, at least from a narrative perspective, a reason why this is an interesting thing to talk about and to explore with this character. and the response has been great. Now, let's talk a little bit about the characters in the book. Like Doiby, for instance, I really felt like although Alan is isolated in so many ways during this time period, he still needed to have his confidant. I didn't feel like it was right for him to have secrets from Doiby. It felt like they should still have he should still know everything about Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. And it turned out it was a really good storytelling device for me because I needed to be able to know what Alan was thinking without putting it all in captions.
It's like Foggy with Daredevil.
Yeah,
I mean, Foggy knows Matt Murdock inside and out, and Foggy, as goofy as he could be portrayed, can also get into Matt's face and go, "You're fucking up. I know you, and you're not doing it right." And that's why I'm intrigued by Doiby being as important as he is in your story.
And you'll see in issue 4 a crucial. You'll see in issue 5.
Oh, okay.
Everybody, wait a month. But in issue 5, you'll see a crucial moment that that reminds you why Alan needs Doiby, and so there's a very important crucial moment that's coming up. So there was that, and with regard to the Spectre, it's funny because I really had a specific take and a voice in mind for the Spectre because I loved the idea that the Spectre, Jim Corrigan died in 1940 and became the Spectre. So that's this book takes place in early 1941. And I thought, I love Doctor Who. And I thought, I love when the Doctor regenerates and he's still not quite done cooking yet. And he's not sure exactly who he is. He's still putting the pieces together. So you've got Jim Corrigan, recently dead. You've got, the Spectre Force, and you've got these competing ideas and ideologies, and he's making sense out of it. So for him to be a little bit out of character, I thought made sense. So we wrote him just a little bit out of character, but then give you in his last beat in that issue a glimpse that this is who he's going to be. Indeed. When he says, "Bring him to me," in an authoritative, terrifying way.
The spirit of vengeance, absolutely.
Man. Yeah. And but the stuff, what's interesting is the stuff he tells Alan about who God's vengeance is reserved for is very much what we learned in Spectre, I think, 42, the Ostrander book in the 90s, when there was a story in which the Spectre confronted his own prejudices regarding gay people, and he went to Michael and in heaven and looking for instruction from him, and the instruction that he got was basically what he says to Alan here. Now that took place in the 90s, but I think the Spectre kind of lives outside of time and things, and those.
I agree.
That information is addled and weird, and he's early on. It's when you're doing your job at its best, when you know all the rules. Like, it's early enough that he knows the right rules. 50 years later, he forgets them, and he has to go back and be reminded. But
and also and I've only read a bit of that original Jerry Siegel Spectre run, but it kind of does fit in where it was by day he's still Jim Corrigan, the cop. By night he's the Spectre. So it's okay that he's not fully fleshed the way he was, not only in the Ostrander run, but even in the 70s, the Michael Fleischer run as well.
When you read everything I did in this, everything I've done in this book is I tried to, as much as I could, stay away from the stuff that came later, because we're in the 40s. And I think true to where we are with the characters, we need to start from the Golden Age books. And there's the beauty of that is there's a lot of space. We don't get a lot of depth. And to be honest, many of the characters, the heroes in that period, they all kind of sound the same. They all even kind of look the same.
Of course they do. Because they were written for 10-year-olds. Yeah, man.
They were trying to, kids who liked one book, they'd pick up this book and they'd get something familiar. So there's a lot of room to sort of explore. And we've seen people explore that over the past 80 years. But I thought, let's reset. Let's go back to basics and start from there. And so what he tells Alan is still in keeping with what he learns in the 90s in the Ostrander book. And it's just that in 1941, surprisingly, he hasn't forgotten it yet. And I think it's an important message. Remember, we're still looking at this through the lens of 2023 and 24. And I think that the Spectre, if he is on the team of DC's version of God as a character in DC, we have a responsibility to sort of say something that makes sense, and
Sure.
And there's a lot of people who have religious beliefs that maybe don't conflate with what he says. There's a lot of people that do have religious beliefs that align perfectly with what he says.
Yeah, Jim Spectre's Old Testament. Absolutely, man. I mean, you could pin him that way. Regarding Alan, though, what I love about your story too, and right from the beginning with that Golden Age issue, this is a guy who's just out of the service. He's very, in the best ways, I don't know if naive is the right word, but he's certainly trusting.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people will see in this fourth issue as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's good because, again, this is like Alan Scott year one, and it's like he's still figuring it out. I love what James Robinson and Paul Smith did in the Golden Age, and that Johnny Quest, another great thing, but Johnny Quick and all of the GSA are like, they call Alan Scott the big guy, and essentially he is the Superman of that story. But again, it's post World War II, so by then Alan has kind of figured out the thing, and in fact is ditching the secret identity to focus more on his personal life and everything. God, I hope you guys have a long enough run, or in the future there's a reason to do a 1950s post or right before Golden Age where Alan is where you guys have put him as far as his personal life, but even I think another opportunity to get more inside Alan's head of, unfortunately when the Senate committee wanted the JSA to unmask him, they're like, nah, how about we just leave? Goodbye. And it's I think, as you said, there is a lot of area to explore if given the chance.
I think the spin too. I mean, first of all, there's a World War II story still to be told with the JSA that, from today's perspective, that we could really do that would be fun.
Cool.
But in the 1950s, everything that we're setting up in the Alan Scott book now, you see with the Soviet Union and with the politics that are only just they're just beginning. And World War II happens, but then after that is when we really get into the Red Scare and also the Lavender Scare, where they were going after homosexuals and we just saw a great TV series on Showtime called Fellow Travelers, which is so
Matt Bomer. Yes.
Matt Bomer and with Jonathan Bailey, and it's so thematically in keeping with this Alan Scott book that it's amazing that I can't believe they came out at the same time. But all of that, the real history that happens, and the history in the DC universe that happens in terms of McCarthy and the Senate
activities,
the congressional anti-American. That stuff has a new sort of shine on it now. Knowing the decision that Alan made as the first one, I think, to walk away, knowing his connection to Vladimir Sokov, the Red Lantern, knowing the nature of that connection, the nature of his connection to a Soviet,
agent.
Read the preview pages, spy. Yeah. Then that really informs the private, secret reasons why he would want to just put up the cape, take off the ring, and go. By the way, that's one of the things that I love about Green Lanterns in general, is that they don't wake up in the morning with their powers. That they are the reason why I think the Green Lantern Corps is equated with like the police is because they, like the police, make a choice. They get up every day and they make a decision to put on the ring and go out and do good.
Yep.
And it's not just something that happens to them. They make an active decision every single day to do it. They're heroes. Those are real heroes. And Alan, while he's not a member of the Corps, we made him a member of the Army Corps of Engineers, but he's a veteran. He is,
Yeah.
he is the best among them. He is a hero, and he's still making that choice, at least now in this story in the 1940s, to get out there every day and do good, even in the face of potential, absolute horrifying hate for who he is personally. He still gets out there and does good. That's a hero.
It's a shade of Steve Rogers that no matter what, he wants to serve, he wants to help. And right. Again, forgive me and my hetero hangups, but when they, I think it was during Winter Soldier and maybe even during Secret Wars, that there was a whole, Cap needs a boyfriend, and he and Bucky should really get together. And I didn't mind that they did the alternate universe thing where Cap and Bucky do get together and stuff, but it also bothered me, I will admit, in terms of, heterosexual men can love their friends and really love their friends without the usual love relationship part that a gay couple or even a man and woman couple can love. And it's like, yeah, because there's that great line in Winter Soldier when it's still the flashback and it's before Steve has his powers and Steve's mom dies, and Bucky's like, hey man, come to the apartment, we'll throw down the cushions like we did when we were kids, we'll sleep on the floor. That's not a sexual encounter. Those are two good friends remembering good times. Good Lord. I mean, not to the point of sleeping on the floor, but I get together with my junior high and high school friends, and we've managed during COVID, and we keep doing the tradition. It's tomorrow night, where we get together once a week. And it's like, oh man, these are like my brothers, man. So it's like, that's the slight difference. Although there's a bit of that in Alan and the Red Lantern. Please tell me your thoughts on that.
That's true. What you said is true, and those are real relationships that you're talking about, and they are not romantic in nature.
Yeah.
And but I will say that there are people as well in your world for whom, when the cushions got thrown onto the floor, that there was a little bit more going on than just being buddies. And then you didn't talk about it the next day.
Oh, so no, you're right, man.
I'm just saying that those stories exist too.
Of course they do. And of course they do.
So sometimes they are, maybe it's not the right story for Cap and Bucky, but it is. Those stories do exist, and they deserve to be somehow out there in the world. And
I completely agree, man. And that's truly. It started with Tynan and his retelling of the origin, but what you and John's are doing with Alan, and really now it's in your hands, man. No, I look. There are books that I look forward to every month, and Alan Scott the Green Lantern is absolutely among the top books. And I mean it, Tim. It's the truth, man. And I mean, I listen. Jeremy is a guy that I would love to talk to at some point, and shame on me for missing his Barry Allen Wally West run. And I love what he's doing with Jay and Jay's daughter, and that's a fun story. And right now, I'm blanking on who currently is doing Sandman.
Rob Venditti.
Oh, of course, Rob Venditti, another guy that I've had on group shows, but I haven't had him on one-on-one yet. Yeah. Well, everything you're describing, though, in terms of what you're doing with Alan, is what Steve Siegel and Matt Wagner did with Sandman in the whenever it was, if it was 90s or early 2000s, Sandman Mystery Theater. And it's taking those 10-page Sandman stories and giving them depth, and giving Wesley and Diane more depth in terms of their relationship and their characters and stuff. And that's great.
I think when we were working on Flashpoint Beyond, that Jeff said, "You've read Sandman Mystery Theater, haven't you?" And I said, "I haven't." And he goes, "Go home right now and read." Amazing. I said, "Okay, yes, sir." And so I did. And then now, getting to see what Rob is doing, I feel like it's such a love letter in so many ways. It ties for me in so many ways to what they did with Mystery Theater. That it's a great book. When he pitched it we did a little story summit for the New Golden Age.
Sure.
And all three of us, Jeremy and Rob and I, pitched our stories to the editors and to each other, and we were just sitting there like listening to Rob tell the story, and Jeremy and I were like, "Well, that's the best one, so I guess we'll be sort of bringing up the rear is what we'll be doing." But that's fine, because Rob is great. He's absolutely great, and
that's
Wesley
great, man.
Deserves some love again.
Well, again, what I mean, and Wesley more so almost was part of that pre-superhero Mystery Men. I love when they refer to the handful of like Doc Occult and Slam Bradley and those early yeah, man, no, those are great characters that, you know, they were first attempts by the Golden Age creators that later gave us Superman and Batman and the like and everything. And it's like, no, they're valuable to go back to. And again, Wagner always did it, and like he put them in Madame Xanadu. And I always love him. I'm like, you know, was DC cool with it? He goes, I just did it, and they couldn't do anything about it. I just did it. I'm like, way to go, Matt. That's terrific.
I'm pretty sure DC didn't change it, but I think the byline on the first page of the first issue of Alan Scott is a newspaper story, and I think the byline is Slam Bradley. I think.
Well, again, they're both in Gotham. I mean, and that's another thing I love about Alan, that Alan was in Gotham pre-Batman, and
he moved. He's in our story. He just moved to New York, and so which is kind of to put him in the place with the JSA and stuff.
Certainly. Oh, so, sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he's still got his Gotham history. In fact, there's a few years gap here between when he becomes Green Lantern and when he goes to New York. That little time that he has really when he's first starting out in Gotham, when he has absolutely no idea what his powers do or can do. He still doesn't really know. He's still figuring it out in our book, and he's learning about some of it from the Red Lantern, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
About what his potential is. But that little period of time in Gotham, I would love to see somebody sort of tell a story set in there. You know,
is this a mini series? Is it a finite series?
Yeah, this is 6 issues. So
we're almost done.
Yeah. Number 4 is January 30th tomorrow, and then 2 more after that. And then, yeah, we're wrapped up.
Oh man. Well, I hope you get a chance to come back to it because even as a broadcast nerd, I mean, Alan, after, one of his civilian jobs was as a radio announcer, and then of course they make him in James and Paul Smith's Golden Age. He's in charge of Gotham Broadcasting, and I'm like, that's really interesting.
That would be part of his next arc of a story. Sort of finding his feet again, having not really any need to be a train engineer of any kind. Sort of figuring out. Excuse me, what his next, so what Alan's next role is while the Green Lantern is doing what he does. But and also all of the many loves, and what are those loves? What do they mean? How does it work in terms of
we won't see Molly or the Thorn in
this is 1941, so this was well before they were in the picture. So okay. But in issue 6, because we're wrapping up the story, I've made a little room to at least point toward Alan's future.
Okay.
And it's important, man. I'll tell you right now, it's not really spoilery, but I'll tell you right now that I didn't come here to change Alan Scott's trajectory and his plot line of his life. I think, Understood. As far as I'm concerned, if I was the guy who was writing the next book, it all still happens. Everything still happens. All of it.
Well, and again,
now there are more layers to the why and the when and the how. But it's the thing that I want to stress to people, because there's a lot of folks who feel like, there are people who will say, this makes me uncomfortable about Alan because he seems like a villain now because he's duping these women and marrying them and lying to them. Well, number one, nobody's told that story, so you don't know that he's lying to anybody, first of all. But also, I just firmly believe that Alan Scott is a hero, and he's a good man. And he also has, we also can afford him what we afford anybody else, which is the ability to make mistakes. So he could also, that could be it too. I don't know, because I'm not writing that story. But
Understood.
But he has he can make mistakes like anybody else, or he can, have a kind of relationship with these people that he loves that maybe has a different form than just romance.
Well, and also can could be a bisexual gentleman and honestly love Molly and Thorn as he did, but also just like hetero people, you fall out of love, and I mean that's regardless Jade and Obsidian are there as abandoned kids that thankfully have reconnected with their father in the modern sense, but there is that period where Alan left their mothers.
I hear people shouting all the time about how could you? Alan Scott is a well-known family man, and I'm like, you haven't read the comics. Alan Scott didn't know his kids until they were adults. Like,
absolutely, man.
He didn't raise children. That wasn't part of his story. Although I think he'd be a great dad, and he think he's a great dad, and he's a great dad to adult children. But
absolutely,
he got there.
To his credit, he reconnected with his kids, and isn't leaving them in the lurch once he knew who they were, and it's especially Obsidian. And I think that, and I mean, Jade's great too, but Jade seems more adjusted than poor Obsidian did. Certainly in the Infinity Inc. era.
That was a complex relationship in the when Todd came out, and that was really difficult. And now there's a whole new shade and a whole new light on that now. Which
absolutely,
why would Alan feel the way he did and say what he did? And I think now it's clear that he was dealing with his own issues.
Agreed.
And while in our book, Alan seems to be quite confidently knowing who he is, I would caution anybody to read it that way, because if they read it that way, because Alan, at this point in his life, every relationship he's engaged in that we've seen has been with people who are doppelgangers to Johnny Ladd. And Johnny Ladd is Vladimir Sokov, the Red Lantern.
Yes, his persona,
So if anything, Alan is maybe confused about the fact that he feels a connection to Johnny, Vlad, and that is part of his it is sexualized for him, it's romanticized for him, but you have to remember that these two characters are inextricably linked by the powers of the Crimson Flame and the Emerald Flame, and those two things are wildly confusing and impossible for human beings to translate and to understand. And maybe the only way you can figure it out is to equate it to deep romantic love. And so that's a confusing thing to come up against. That's not to say Alan's not gay. He is gay. We know that because we've seen it in modern day in the continuity. But at this point in his life in 1941, boy, that could not get more confusing for you as a person. And so I just want to give him the ability to make mistakes and try to figure it out.
I honestly, man, it's like I've read Alan Scott's stories for so long, and this interpretation that now is canon was like a Rubik's Cube finally being solved. And it's like, well, like you said, it all makes sense. His relationship with Obsidian, his own self-guilt of not being there and not knowing who he was for so long, or however long it takes. I mean, it all fits. It really does all fit.
Whether those were the intentions of the writers, we really don't know unless we talk to them. They might have subversively been trying to write Alan that way. We don't know. We can't say for sure. Probably those weren't their intentions.
Probably.
But the good news is the story track. It does track. You may not like it, but it does. So
yeah,
these are real people in our lives.
Have you met Roy Thomas? I mean, Roy's a guy. I think Roy, and forgive me, everybody, a little editorial on John's part. Roy used an Asian adjective that was acceptable for most of Roy's life, and it was nothing curt. He referred to Iron Fist and Orientals, and got a lot of shit for that. And it's like, this is a guy in his late 70s, almost 80. I don't think he did it with any malice, but it would be interesting, given the amount of Alan Scott stories that he wrote with All-Star Squadron and Infinity Inc., to wonder if he has any thoughts on what has happened to Alan Scott and how you guys portray him now. I would be interested to see that. I kind of believe that Roy is enough, given that he grew up in the 60s and 70s when things got more accepting, and especially being a New York guy, maybe with Stonewall and some of the stuff that happened in New York, that I'd like to think that he'd be cool with it. But I don't know if you've ever met him.
I haven't, but it's interesting because you led me to something very interesting that just happened this weekend, which was I was lucky enough to do another. I'm going to plug another podcast, and I'm sorry.
Shame on you. I'm kidding.
Podcast of OA with Myron and Phil, and they invited me, and they invited Spencer Nodell, who is the son of Martin Nodell, who created Alan Scott.
Oh man, I was going there. That's fantastic. Go on.
And so Martin, of course, has left this world, but Spencer is you see him a lot at conventions, and sort of keeping the emerald flame,
if you will.
And
the co-creator of Green Lantern, everybody, Martin Nodell. Go on.
And so we were chatting, and he, out of nowhere, offered this very interesting bit of inside information, which is, he said, I've seen some people out there saying that that my father would be very upset with the direction that Alan Scott has gone in, that DC has taken the character in. And he said, that's just not who he was, and not who he or my mom were. And he told a great story about how they used to travel to St. Louis all the time. And every time they went to St. Louis, they would stay with their best friends in St. Louis, who were a gay couple. And they stayed at their house every time they went there. And they were great friends their whole lives. And that's who they were. And so anybody who tells you differently, who thinks that they knew what Marty Nodell would think, and what, I would refer them to the words of his actual son, Spencer, who would say the opposite. Now, not that it's a necessary thing. The DC obviously gets to do with the character whatever they want to do with the character. That's for good, better or worse. That's how it works. But it certainly is nice to know. It's a nice footnote to think that maybe Marty's up there smiling down and saying, "Hey, I'm just happy people are talking about Alan Scott."
No, dude, that is great to hear. I had the pleasure of meeting Martin before I was doing my podcast, because as many probably know, along with his comic book career, he was a big advertising guy. He created Poppin' Fresh, the Pillsbury Doughboy. And so he had a lot of ties to Chicago. Leo Burnett was the ad agency that he worked at here in Chicago. So he would always come to the Chicago shows. And also Carrie, his wife, they were terrific. They were adorable. Sadly,
a comic book letterer, Carrie.
Oh, I didn't know Carrie was a letterer. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, by the time I started doing Word Balloon, it was around the time of his last couple conventions, and losing Carrie really took the wind out of his sails. He would still show up and I bet Spencer was probably with him at the show that I saw him at. And I said, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast. I'd love to talk to you about Alan Scott." And he's like, "Yeah, John, I appreciate it, but he goes, I love that the fans still love the character and stuff." He said, "But I don't have that enthusiasm in my head because Carrie was such a great cheerleader and loved the fans."
They were a team. Those two.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, again, I saw it before she passed. So, this is interesting. And I should have asked. I spoke to Orlando about some of this stuff that we're talking about as well. And on Ardo Burrows' take, would you ever have an interest in writing a Midnighter and or Apollo book, or them together?
Okay, so first of all, you can see
zooming in
right here. This guy,
there he is. There's Midnighter.
I absolutely. However, I don't know how to follow Steve Orlando into the world of Midnighter, because that, to me, that book changed everything for me. And that would be a tall task, but I would love, with the right story, to have a shot at that. But man, Steve's book is worth, why read what I write when you can go back and read Steve's book?
I hear you, man, and I feel that way about the original Authority run, and I'm looking forward to what James Gunn is going to do with the Authority. I'm also looking forward to, as you said, about just the Green Lantern Corps in general and being the police procedural that a lot of us feel it is, that's intriguing, and I think that's going to be great. So, yeah, and I agree. All right, and our Burrows Snake also says, yeah, Steve is so good at DC. He's good at Marvel, too, man. Like I said, I just talked to him last week. And he's a good man with a great sense of humor, and much like Tim, is willing to get into some nitty gritty about writing gay characters and portraying them in comics.
I've never met him, and
wow,
I tried to meet him at New York Comic Con, and we kept missing each other.
Oh, that's a shame.
But then he said some nice stuff and was pointing people toward the Alan Scott book when it came out. And they sent him a message. I was, that's really kind of you. You know, thank you so much.
That's great, man. You guys pay it forward.
Yeah, he's
that's great. Any other animation projects coming up that you can talk about? Maybe not. All right, fair enough. Buddy.
I can't talk about anything. I can't talk about anything. However, obviously the big news is certainly Alan Scott, number 4 coming out tomorrow. We're going to get you up to speed on the Red Lantern, and so that ends up being sort of half the book is really getting up to speed on Red Lantern. I keep telling people I feel like this issue is going to read great in the trade because it'll be a nice sort of change of pace, and then it'll drop you back into the action, but there's a lot of useful information that you're going to need in this issue. So then issue 5 and 6 will come out in the next couple of months. But then if you haven't seen Masters of the Universe Revolution, that is currently streaming on Netflix. Only 5 episodes. It's 2.5 hours. Watch them all. If you like it, hit the double thumbs up button to tell Netflix you loved it so we can do more. We are doing a prequel 4-issue miniseries for Dark Horse Comics that begins May 15th, which you can pre-order now. And that is going to be a really deep story about the connection and the complex relationship and the beginnings of the relationship between Hordak and Skeletor. So please check that out.
And final comment from David. I was sad that the character in the Asylum, yes, who made the Lantern, had such a tragic end. Is there a chance their story has more to come? Yeah, that again. It was a good spin on the original story too, where the guy who took the green meteor turned it into a lantern, and the flame makes him sane, and again, the way you guys spun it, it was much more tragic. Absolutely,
it's tragic. It needed to be, unfortunately, but it's tragic right now. Yes, where we left things is tragic. It's a good question. I think all I will say is I think there is great hope for anyone who has touched or been touched by the Emerald Flame of Life. So take from that what you will.
All right. Well, we have 3 more issues, including tomorrow's release of issue 4, to mull over what Tim might be telegraphing to us. But that's great, man. Now, Tim, honestly, I really appreciate you coming back. Like I said, you're killing it on Green Lantern, and I'm so glad before we had the conversation, and that is my usual, hey, John, guess what else is happening in the real world that you're missing? Things like the Masters of the Universe Season 2, and it's like, oh, that's right, yeah, Tim wrote the first season. Oh, he wrote the second season too. Oh, that's great. Okay, well, we got more to talk about. Wonderful, man. So I promise I will finish the other 3 episodes I haven't seen.
I just absolutely love chatting with you, and
thanks, buddy.
Great questions from your viewers and listeners, and always a fun time. I'll come back anytime.
Well, and again, people are saying nice things about you and the conversation, and and here, hoping that we'll get more of what you're suggesting may come in the future of Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. Now, great job, Tim, and honestly, my pleasure. Keep me in the loop if I miss an announcement or something. Go, hey, I don't know if you know, but whatever. I mean, we can certainly talk about the Masters prequel that you got coming up in May for Dark Horse. Yeah. That's great.
I'll bring the guys. So, I'll bring Rob David from Mattel and Teddy Biaselli from Netflix, because we all conceived this story together, and maybe we can do a little, a group chat. It'll be fun.
Oh, if the guys are available, sure, I'd love that. That'd be terrific. Everybody, just so you know, tomorrow I'm going to take off because I'm going to be with my buddies at tent night, my junior high and high school friends that we used to put the cushions down. But no monkey business happened between our group.
Yeah, but nothing happened. Yeah.
No, we just slept. Either we slept, and as we were in high school and college, we were hungover. But that's God. I remember my 20th birthday. Good Lord, plowed. Shame on me. Illegal drinking. What are you gonna do?
Amazing.
Anyway,
I'm supposed to remember it at all.
Well, Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to talk to Chip Zdarsky, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, really?
Yep. Oh, yeah, we'll catch up.
I'll be tuning in for that.
Oh, that's great, man. And then Wednesday night, Keith Champagne is going to be on another JSA vet with a new Kickstarter that he's got going. And then Thursday, I'm going to dip into my old radio days, and my buddy Dan McNeil, who really was responsible for getting me into Chicago radio. We're going to have a nice memory lane conversation about sports radio, current sports subjects as well. But we worked together for 10 years. Well, actually more than that, because then we worked together at a different radio station for a couple of years. So yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
Working man. What you got? You have so many people coming on this week.
Well, I try to do at least 3 or 4 a week if I can, just to give people something to watch and listen to. So all that's coming up. Until then, thank you for watching tonight. Everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.